if they had black players for 12 years playing with them, what made them just say, hey, we don't want to have them any longer? Was it just that mindset?
Yes. Yeah, it was that, hey, if we're going to expand, the rest of the world in America is all segregated. Segregated leagues.
Got it.
And so, there was no Major League Soccer at the time. I think so.
So it was about business. It was an expansion standpoint, right?
And the NHL was all white.
Yes.
So we're going to be a professional league here. Well, the
baseball's all white.
The pattern is you're all white,
right?
And there was nobody willing to take the step. Right. No Branch Rickey of the NFL at the time.
But there was. What's the dude's name?
Halley Harding.
He
steps forward.
A newspaper guy.
Yes.
All right. Changed the trajectory.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
In terms of getting blacks back into the NFL. Wow.
We'll discuss race and how it plays a factor and how we didn't even talk about this topic because we were afraid.
A Black Executive Perspective.
We are coming to you live from the new BEP studio for another thought-provoking episode of a Black Executive Perspective podcast, a safe space where we discuss all matters regarding race, culture, and those uncomfortable topics people tend to avoid. I'm your host, Tony Tidbit. So, very exciting. You see, I got my Lion shirt on, so that should give you a little sense of what we're going to be talking about today. But before we get into this, I want to remind everybody to check out our partners at Code M Magazine, whose mission is to save the black family by first saving the black man. So check them out at codemmagazine.com. That is codemmagazine.com. And so today we want you to check this out because we're going to explore how one football game became the most powerful cultural event in America. The Super Bowl is just more than a game. It's a $40 billion juggernaut that shapes media, race, business, and identity. Joining us today is Dennis Deninger, three-time Emmy Award producer at ESPN, a Syracuse University professor, and the author of the book The Football Game That Changed America. We're going to dive into the hidden history behind the NFL rise, the overlooked contributions of black athletes and leaders, and what the Super Bowl reveals about who holds power in America. Dennis, welcome to a Black Executive Perspective podcast, my brother.
Tony, thanks for the invitation. It's great to be here.
Bro, hold on. Number one, I got it. I just noticed it too. You got your Syracuse
you run the Lions.
I got the Lions. You got the Syracuse. Right. I love it, my friend. The orange is in town. The orange is in the studio today, which is awesome. But look, man, so excited that you're here. I'm a big sports fan. Been a huge football fan since I was a little kid in the 70s, right? So having you in here and talking about, the Super Bowl and the history behind it, but not just that, all the other nuances that people may not be aware of that that you wrote about in your book is so exciting. So, but before we get to that, tell us a little bit about where you're currently living and a little bit about your family.
I live in Cheshire, and for a dozen years, I've been commuting back and forth to Syracuse every other week, spending a couple of days up there and then a couple of days back here because I was teaching in the sport management department and in the Newhouse School of Public Communications up there. And before that, the reason I came to Connecticut in the first place was I was hired as the first coordinating producer of SportsCenter back in 1982. You may have been about 10 years old or younger. And I started as one of the leaders of SportsCenter. I had been executive producer of the NBC station in Miami. And I was always a sports fan. And I made that really clear to the people who were doing the hiring. I told them about all of the things that I remembered from the New York Giants way back when, And anyway, so I started at ESPN, and it was a great opportunity. I started my family just before we left Miami, and we raised them up here in Cheshire, Connecticut. I've got two sons. They're both off and married, so it's kind of a quiet house, except when I'm at home. It's been great. I started at ESPN. I had 5 different jobs in the course of that, and I finished up as head of production for ESPN Digital. So I learned a whole lot about digital distribution and production. And I had an opportunity to go up to Syracuse to teach at my alma mater. And it was just about the time ESPN was starting to lay off people and think about layoffs. And I'd been there a long time, and I'd gotten up to 3 weeks of vacation, and they'd given me raises, et cetera. So I thought, okay, let me just explore this. And I was offered an opportunity to create a graduate level course at the Newhouse School, which is where I graduated from. And I said to my wife, I don't think this opportunity is going to come along a second time. So we should take that. Thankfully, she was working full time with benefits at the same time, so because I was going off to a kind of a non-benefit job to start with. But once I tell my students this is once you get across the threshold, once you show people what you can do, then the sky's the limit. And I was there as an adjunct for just a couple of years. And they said, Dennis, we want to start a sports communications graduate program here at the Newhouse School, and we'd love to have you lead it. And then I got offered a position with the sport management program, which was just in its infancy, but with David Falk, who was Michael Jordan's agent and Alonzo Mourning's agent and agent for well over 50 great NBA players all at the same time. He put some money in, and he came and he saw me teach, and he said, Dennis, what are you wasting your time over at the Newhouse School? You got to come over to this Falk. It was named for him, David Falk School of Sport Management. So I went over there, and I've still taught at both schools, and it was a great opportunity. Just, meeting young people and just being able to influence their careers and their choices. And it's been a great opportunity. And now I've cut back a bit. I'm professor emeritus, which is very nice. A couple of my friends in Cheshire call me Captain Emeritus, but I don't have to wear a cape, And so I'm teaching a little less up there, kind of on a part-time basis. But I still really enjoy connecting with the students and making a difference.
That's awesome, my friend. So tell me a little bit, why did you want to come on a Black Executive Perspective podcast to talk about this topic?
You know what? In this book, there are a lot of instances of where the NFL changed and the Super Bowl changed because of a few individual Black leaders. And I thought it was important to get those stories across, because in history, sometimes they're pretty much buried.
Right.
And you see the end result. We all see that the Super Bowl is now 59 years old going into Super Bowl 60. But we don't know exactly how it got there, how the NFL, there's no reason why you'd have a Super Bowl if you hadn't had two leagues competing.
Right.
And okay, so why was there an AFL? Why was the NFL forced to merge with the AFL? All those things kind of behind the scenes that led to the Super Bowl being this colossus that it is now.
Okay, buddy. Well, look, it seems like you're chomping at the bit, which I love to talk to you. So you ready to talk about it, my brother?
Absolutely.
All right. So let's talk about it, man. So you already started doing this, pulling back the curtain a little bit on, which is now America's big game. And, when I was a kid, America's pastime was baseball, right? And football was there, but not at the level it is now. Now football is America's pastime. So let me ask you this question. Why do you feel that you had to write this book?
You know what? I started teaching a course, a person I started working for in the Department of Sport Management, Michael Veely. The first meeting I ever went to, I'm just starting out meeting the people, and he says to me, Dennis, I'd like to talk to you at lunch. I've got this idea about teaching us a course about the Super Bowl.
It's time to rethink your protein. AgileLab's protein bars are crafted with high-quality protein, double the leucine, and enriched branched-chain amino acids, essential for optimal muscle recovery. Finally, a protein bar that works as hard as you do. So visit agilelabs.com and use the code BEP to get 20% off. That's agilelabs.com, promo code BEP.
I thought that's really a neat idea, because there are a lot of things that students will study in a 4-year college education that do not have a $40 billion impact on the United States, and that are not the most covered event of the year by the media, that is not the largest advertising day of the year, that is not a cultural and social engine. The Super Bowl has become, as former Commissioner Paul Tagliabue said, winter's 4th of July. It's patriotic. It's a celebration. And it's this missing holiday in the early days, early months of a year that it's made itself a holiday. And people take the day off after the Super Bowl. That's actually part of the economic impact. Is about $6 billion worth of lost productivity the day after the Super Bowl on Monday. But the NFL is working to fix that. In the next collective bargaining agreement, come 30-30, they're going to move the number of regular season games to 18. Right. 17 is just an odd number. It doesn't belong. Right. It's going to be 18. And in a 19-game season, meaning that the season will be 1 week longer and that the Super Bowl will almost always fall on President's Day weekend. So that Monday, federal holiday, will always be the day after the Super Bowl. So more people will get that day off. So that's why I got involved with this, and I am really, as you can tell, interested in the topic.
Buddy, I see. I love it. And you threw a couple of nuggets already out, right? And we didn't get to page 1 yet. But let me ask you this. Based on, all your research to put your book together, give me a nugget or two which was more the very, very fascinating that you had no clue about when you were doing your research.
Okay, one of the surprising things that you'd find, and it never got covered because in the 1940s, the NFL was, as you said, baseball was king.
Right.
Baseball, the World Series started being covered nationwide in the 1940s. But NFL football it wasn't something that people covered nationally. People paid much more attention to college football.
Right.
So I found that the NFL actually reintegrated a year before Jackie Robinson played any games for the Brooklyn Dodgers. But there isn't a lot of credit for Kenny Washington and Woody Strode, for being the first black players in the NFL after a 12-year absence. And I thought that was fascinating, that people should know that and how that came about. And there's a wonderful story here, and that this happened. The NFL had basically what they call the gentleman's agreement, never written down.
And what year was this?
Okay, we're talking 1946.
1946, got it.
Right after World War II.
Right.
1946, there was a plan by the Cleveland Rams. A lot of people don't realize that the Rams started in Cleveland. The Cleveland Rams wanted to move to the West Coast to become the NFL's first West Coast franchise.
So like baseball with the Brooklyn Dodgers moving to LA.
To San Francisco, right. Yeah, in LA and San Francisco. Yeah. The Giants, the same year, right. Yeah. Well, 10 years before that, right, the Cleveland Rams wanted to move to Los Angeles, and they wanted to play in a publicly owned facility, which is the LA Memorial Coliseum. So in January of 1946, the LA Commission, covering that it was in charge of the Memorial Coliseum, they had a public hearing in January. And this is less than 6 months after the end of World War II. Mm. And we want to, should we do a lease with this team moving in here? And one very brave and bright black man attended this hearing. His name was Halley Harding. And Halley Harding is a name lost in history, but he was a columnist for the LA Tribune, which was the black newspaper in Los Angeles at the time. And we want to get comments from the floor. And he stood up and just talked for less than 5 minutes, but said the LA Coliseum is a publicly owned facility. That means that people of every race and every age, they pay their taxes, and that helps support this Coliseum. Now we have an all-white team moving here from Cleveland. Now, the NFL was all white, this gentleman's agreement. Right? So they were all white. And he said, the West is a land of opportunity. We just finished the World War II, and in it, brave black soldiers gave their lives. And this is a time for us to realize that we have to open this up. Now, it cannot be an all-white team that moves into this public facility. And the general manager of the soon-to-be Los Angeles Rams, Cleveland Rams, a guy by the name of Charles Walsh, and he went by Chili. Chili Walsh was there. He's representing the Rams. They think, okay, this is going to be just a regular hearing and we'll get this done. They put him on the spot. They said, what do you say, Mr. Walsh? You know? And what one great thing that Halley Harding did is he said, there are great black players who have not been given an opportunity to play in the NFL.
So he said that.
Yes, he says that to the commission. And he names Kenny Washington. Kenny Washington played for UCLA from 1937 to 1939. He was UCLA's first All-American. He was black. He never, ever got an invite to any NFL team because this is an all-white league.
Right.
You know? And the owners at the time thought a couple of things. They thought, well, if we, in segregated America,
If we open the door.
if we have a black player,
Right.
that might alienate our fans.
Right.
You know, backward thinking, right? Not progressive thinking.
Right.
And the owner of the Boston Redskins, who moved the team to Washington, D.C. in the late 1930s, a guy by the name of George Preston Marshall, said, well, you know what? If we have a black player on our team playing in the deep South, Washington, D.C., because the NFL had no team south of there, you know, that player could be harmful.
He could get killed.
Exactly. So we want to protect these players by not letting them play.
So that was their mindset.
Yeah, it's a mindset. Now, and so Ken Washington is this great player, and now he graduated in 1940. This is 1946. He's been playing for some Pacific Coast leagues where they allowed blacks in, and he's making money in a few different ways. And Chili Walsh said, well, listen, you know, we're moving here, and you know, we'll look at any good player that can help us win. So bingo, 3 weeks later, late in January, the commission approves the lease for the Cleveland Rams to come to Los Angeles. On this, you know, this is what you got to do is you got to and you got to give an opportunity. So they had to work out.
So just so I'm saying, not to cut you off, just so I'm clear though.
Yeah.
So they put that in the language when they did the lease for
No,
the
I don't think it.
So it wasn't
but it's
in
a
the language.
stipulation.
It was
is that we had an understanding.
We
here.
have understanding.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
And
we're going to give you this property to be able to play, but you got to open it up to other people.
And we're holding the lease, and this is not an indefinite lease. You know, you don't comply with what we want.
Because you know, people can say, "I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do that," and it doesn't happen.
So
Go ahead,
within a month, he had Ken Washington and Woody Strode in there working out, and they both made the team. And Woody Strode is more famous as an actor. He was in about 100 movies. He was in the Ten Commandments movie, Spartacus. All these early movies.
A brother? Was he rowing?
Oh my God, no, I don't think so. No, he was. You know, he
battle speed.
He was a strong, very impressive presence on camera. So anyway, that reintegrated the NFL. Now, did it get a lot of attention? No, because the NFL didn't get a lot of coverage.
Now, when you say reintegrated, who was the first black player that played in the NFL?
In 1920, the 1920 is when the NFL was founded. It was founded as the American Professional Football Association. It was the APFA for 2 years. Then they renamed themselves the National Football League. The champions that first year were the Akron Pros. They went 8-0-3 on the strength of their backfield star, who was Fritz Pollard. Fritz Pollard had taken Brown University in 1919 to the Rose Bowl. So he had experience in the Rose Bowl. He graduates in 1920, and he's now playing for the Akron Pros. Not a full-time job. Still basically a semi-pro league.
Correct.
But he leads that team to an undefeated season. The next season, he's promoted as player coach. He's like a co-head coach. So there were black players until 1932. So the league had 12 years of experience, and we've got these great players, but they gradually, you know, as they retired, they didn't replace them. And it was this, you know, we're a segregated league. Like there's the Major League Baseball is segregated, and there's the black professional leagues. And, you know, it was a really very divided mindset socially in this country.
So, but just my question is, what if they had black players for 12 years playing with them? What made them just say, hey, we don't want to have them any longer? Was it just that mindset?
Yes. Yeah, it was that, hey, if we're going to expand, the rest of the world in America is all segregated. Segregated leagues.
Got it.
And so, there was no Major League Soccer at the time or anything.
Got it.
So,
so it was about business. It was an expansion standpoint, right?
And the NHL was all white.
Yes.
So, we're going to be a professional league here. Well, the
baseball's
pattern
all white.
The pattern is you're all white.
Right.
And there was nobody willing to take the step. Right. No Branch Rickey of the NFL at the time.
But there was, what's the dude's name?
Halley Harding.
Halley Harding,
he steps forward.
A newspaper guy.
Yes.
All right. Changed the trajectory.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
In terms of getting blacks back into the NFL. That's
it's a great lesson of history in that coming forward and speaking up. And Halley Harding was not overpowering speaker. He presented his case very clearly. Here we are 6 months out of World War II, and all these black soldiers have participated, and we have people of all races here in the Los Angeles area, and they all pay their taxes. And it's a public forum. Yes, public forum and a public owned facility.
Right.
So why shouldn't the public be involved with this new team? So it was a powerful message. And sadly, that's not recorded anywhere. But if you went online and you looked up Fritz Pollard, Woody Strode's son did kind of a recreation of the points. And I think it goes about 4.5 minutes. And you can listen to Woody Strode. And he's not reading from the script that Halley Harding had, but it's pretty much the same points. And it's powerful.
Wow, buddy, that is so right. You just gave me exactly some of the nuggets that the research that you did in your book that kind of blew you away. Let me ask you this. The NFL, you said started in 1920.
Yep.
Right? And then the Super Bowl didn't start until 1967. Right? So for
47
years, it was just an NFL championship. That was it. So talk to a little bit about what was the genesis of creating this thing, 50 years ago. I think it's 50 years
59
ago.
Now.
59 years ago,
yeah.
Right? That's now a $40 billion industry for one day. Right? So talk a little bit about that.
Here's another point. If one man had said yes instead of no, they would not have been a Super Bowl. One man in one meeting said no instead of yes, and that launched the Super Bowl.
Talk to us, my friend.
His name was Walter Wolfner. And Walter
Wait,
Wolfner...
hold on, stop for a second.
Yeah, okay.
These names are killing me, though, right? You had Henry Harding, or what was it? Harling Henry, and now you got what?
Halley Harding.
Halley Harding, so HH and WW.
Yeah, that's right. Halley Harding.
Go ahead.
And so Walter Wolfner was the owner of the Chicago Cardinals. Back in the 1950s, there were the Cardinals and the Bears, both in
Chicago. Yep.
And the Bears were killing it. And the Cardinals were not making any money. They were pretty much a losing team. Lamar Hunt, we know the Lamar Hunt Trophy is given to the AFC champions.
Right.
Lamar Hunt is a young man, 26 years old, but he's got behind him the riches of his daddy, H.L. Hunt, who was one of these oil-rich billionaires. Mm-hmm. So he takes a little bit of daddy's money, and he contacts the commissioner of the NFL at the time. And he says, we'd like to have a franchise. We'd like to have a team here in Texas. Now, it's almost unimaginable now that there were no NFL teams in Texas in the 1950s. Said, okay, we'd like to bring a team. And he's thinking, okay, can we buy a team and bring it? He's not even talking expansion franchise, right? He doesn't want to he doesn't want to blow their mind. Okay, you got a current team and we'll move it to Dallas and we'll make a lot of money with it. Right. Okay. Well, the commissioner, Bert Bell is his name, and he says, we've got an expansion committee, but they haven't met in years. So they weren't taking it seriously. He says, but if you could convince Walter Wolfner to sell you the Chicago Cardinals,
right.
We'll let you move them to Dallas, and there you have it. Well, come to find out, there had been a few other rich guys also looking to move teams to cities that did not have championship. They didn't have an NFL team.
They didn't have a team
right,
there.
right. Yeah, Denver and okay. So they were all being directed to Walter Wolfner, and Walter Wolfner married into the money. It wasn't his money. He married the widow of the founder of the Cardinals. So he's kind of, hey, I like being an NFL owner. He didn't care if they lost money because, oh my.
He just liked the status.
Yes, he liked the status, right? So he agrees to take a meeting with young Lamar Hunt. And of course, Walter is in his Miami, winter residence. He's down in Miami. And Lamar Hunt flies from Dallas all the way down and he meets with Walter Wolfner. And Walter Wolfner said, no, I'm not going to sell you the team. Now, if he'd had his sense about him and he'd said, yes, I'll sell you the team, the Cardinals would have moved to Dallas. There would have been no rival league. But instead, he's kind of boastful in the meeting. He says to Lamar Hunt, he calls him Sonny, young man. Hey, young man, I'm not going to sell you my team, and I'm not going to sell it to any of these other rich guys that have been coming to visit me. And here's where he makes the mistake. He names the other rich guys. He names Bud Adams, who is the owner, who becomes the owner in Houston. He's, all these guys are coming here to get my team, and I'm not selling it to any of them.
So hold on. So what I'm hearing is Lamar Hunt heard that.
Yes.
And then got with those other guys and created the AFL.
Exactly. And here's how he did it. He's very Lamar. I met Lamar Hunt. I worked at ESPN when we were putting together Major League Soccer, and Lamar Hunt was one of the founders there. So I had the opportunity to meet with him and work with him a little bit. And always a very reserved man, but really smart.
Right.
He thanks Walter Wolfner. You said no. You should have said yes. But he thanks Walter Wolfner, and he's flying home to Miami. He's flying coach. He was not somebody who would flaunt his wealth, right? He's flying coach, and he has this thought, well, wait a minute. If there's these other rich guys, and they also want to have teams, and the NFL keeps telling them no, maybe on their strength of their wealth, we could start a new league. So he asks a flight attendant, can I have a little bit of paper, please? And so she gives him some American Airlines stationery. And on the flight home to Dallas, he writes out 3 pages of a business plan. How many games per season, all of the details that you would have for a league. And he doesn't share any with anybody. He thinks, I'll give the NFL one more shot. After the NFL turns him down again, he says, he contacts these guys. You're right. He says, okay, contact them all, find out if they want to do this. And yes, they called themselves the Foolish Club. Hey, we're pissing our money away because the NFL is so established, dating back to 1920. But they decided to start a new league. And now, once the money's all together, the NFL comes back to Lamar Hunt and says, we had second thoughts. We're going to give you that expansion franchise in Dallas. And he says, I've made commitments to these people in good faith, and I don't think I should be going back on that for just my own benefit. So, no, thank you. So they found the AFL, starts in 1960, and it has a lot of advantages going for it. It has a national TV contract before it even goes on the air. It's got an ABC contract. And it's got a 14-game season instead of a 12-game season. And so for 2 weeks in September, the AFL is the only game on TV. The AFL, and it had, it also, here's another point. The AFL was colorblind.
So I was going to ask you, were they open to having African Americans and people of color playing for them from the onset?
Yes, that was one of the differences. Arms were opened by Lamar Hunt and his owners. We want the best players. We're going to select players based on merit. Mm-hmm. So there were a lot more African American players on AFL teams, and as a result, it was a faster, more wide open game. And suddenly, people are seeing this as, wow, this is exciting. This is really interesting. And it also gave African American players more opportunities to compete. Get competing offers. Well, the NFL wants me to join their team, but the AFL, now it was raising the salaries.
Right.
And
the AFL was willing to pay.
Yes.
because it was that was an opportunity for them to grow market share, right,
Yes.
against the NFL, which was a dominant league.
Right, very dominant. So, and here's a point: is most of the NFL teams at this time had pretty much a quota of black players. You know, they didn't have many black players at all. And one team, the Washington Redskins, now Commanders, did not have a black player until 1962. And this was that George Preston Marshall who said, "Oh, you know, we want to protect these black players from being injured."
Right.
Well, I tell my students, I think George Preston Marshall is one of these great villains of history. He really was. He was going backwards. He held people back.
Well, it was like Kennesaw Mountain Landis in the commissioner of baseball in the early, because he was the one that kept blacks out for the longest.
Hey, they've got a Negro league. Why should they be playing? Yes, exactly.
But let me ask you this, though, just to counteract to what the Washington Redskin owner said. A lot of the AFL teams were in the South, correct? You had Dallas
and
you
Houston.
had Houston, New Orleans.
No, New Orleans wasn't. No,
okay. But so you had those. What else? Who are some of the Jets were New York.
Right. They started as the New York Titans.
They were New York Titans.
the
And then Denver
Broncos.
Right.
Yeah.
But
And
my point is there was a couple of teams in the South that were open to having black players, right? So that didn't make sense for the Washington Commanders, owner to say that.
Right. It didn't make sense for a long time. It didn't make sense.
Correct.
And so in the last 3 years before Washington, I don't even like saying Redskins because it's really a slur.
Right.
The Washington owner, that team, in the last 3 years before they reintegrated, they won 5 games in 3 years. 2 of those seasons, they only had one win. So they realized, hey,
we don't have the
selecting
best
players
talent.
on merit
Yeah,
should be a good.
yeah, we don't have the best talent.
Right. You can't operate a whites-only team in this world.
Now, let me ask you this, Dennis. One of the things, so number one, that's awesome. And then obviously, as you have in your book, the AFL, right, eventually became even to the NFL, all right, once the Jets and the Chiefs ended up winning the Super Bowls, right? Talk about how they came up with the name. It's because they had the NFL championship, right? That was popular, right? Packers won a lot, but talk a little bit, what was the mindset and what was the reason to come up with the game that now...
Right.
All right.
Well, Lamar Hunt was a visionary. And 2 years into the AFL, he approached Pete Rozelle, who was the commissioner of the NFL, and said, it'd be a really good idea if we had a championship game between these two leagues. Well, Pete Rozelle was still smarting from the fact that the AFL had sued the NFL in federal court for a couple of things that the NFL did as the AFL was beginning.
Well, trying to keep them out, right? Collusion and whatever.
Right. So he was not in a mindset we're not going to play, because their fear was if the NFL put an AFL team on the same field, it would give this AFL credibility that they didn't think it belonged, that it deserved. Right. So, but after a number of years with the AFL and the NFL both competing for players, it was driving the costs up for these NFL teams. And when Joe Namath signed in 1965 for $427,000,
which today would be like $5 million.
Exactly, right. So
maybe more.
Probably, yeah. So when he signed that money, the quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, who had been excellent, he famously said, well, if this kid gets $400,000, I'm worth $1 million. So see, it's driving the cost up.
Right.
The general manager of the Dallas Cowboys, it was a team started by the NFL once Lamar Hunt started going in Dallas. So they competed with Lamar Hunt's team for a couple of years, and then Lamar Hunt moved his team to Kansas City. So the Dallas Texans, his Dallas Texans became the Kansas City Chiefs. Anyway, this competition was driving the owners. They couldn't afford it. So the general manager, this guy, Tex Schramm,
became Dallas Cowboys.
He said to Pete Rozelle, we can't afford this. So I think we should talk about merging. So he says, you know what? I don't want, let's find out about that. I would like you to meet with Lamar Hunt, but keep it quiet because we want to hear what they have to say. We don't automatically say we're going to do
Yeah,
this,
we don't
right?
want to go with our
Yeah,
our hats in our hand.
Yeah, exactly, right. So Lamar Hunt was traveling into Dallas from somewhere, and the commissioner, I'm not commissioner, the general manager there, Tex Schramm, is in Dallas. So he said, let's meet at the airport. I'll come out to the airport and meet you. And there was an old Texas Ranger statue. I'll meet you by the Texas Ranger statue. And they start chatting and they look, this is kind of a public place. So they go out to Tex Schramm's Buick out in the parking lot. And that's where the first conference, the first meeting to discuss merging the two leagues takes place in the back of a car, for God's sakes, right? Anyway, and one of the first stipulations that the NFL said was, all right, you're going to have to, if we merge, you, the AFL, you're going to have to move two teams that are competing with our NFL teams. You got to move the Jets out of New York, and you got to move the Oakland Raiders out of the Bay Area because they're competing with the 49ers. And Lamar Hunt, in his inimitable way, says, well, Tex, that's a non-starter.
Right.
Because we got this kid, Broadway Joe, playing in New York, and we're never going to move the Jets from there.
Right.
And the Raiders have, they've started to have a following out there. Yeah. We're just not going to move. So you got to get past that. Anyway, they came to a decision, and what they put these like details down as to what you would do if you merged leagues. And one of them was, well, you've got an AFL championship game, and we've got an NFL championship game. So we've got to have the champions of those two meet in a world championship game. And that was decided in the spring of 1966. And they voted on it. The owners voted on it in June. And then they said, okay, we're going to do this championship game next January. So
it came together quick.
Yeah, and there's very little time to make it come together. They didn't have a venue yet, but Pete Rozelle had worked for the Rams. He had been their general manager before becoming the commissioner. So he pretty much knew he could get that LA Memorial Coliseum, right, as the site for a Super Bowl. And they had all sorts of details to work out because they had different roster sizes. And one thing that they did do was they combined the draft. And no longer was there this competition for the players could get. And Floyd Little, who was a great Syracuse University running back.
He got drafted by Denver, right?
Yes. And he's in the Hall of Fame. Floyd used to come into my class every year up at Syracuse. God rest his soul. But he said, he would tell the story is, I would complain to my parents that if I had just been born 1 year earlier, I could have gotten this money because the Jets had told him, we're going to pay you Joe Namath money to be in our backfield, $400,000. Well, he comes out in the first year of the combined draft, and he gets from Denver 25, 26, and 27,000 for 3 years. Right? Like, oh my God, and he was still pissed. I lost out on a lot of money, Dennis.
If you like what you hear and want to join us on this journey of making uncomfortable conversations comfortable, please subscribe to a Black Executive Perspective podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Hit subscribe now to stay connected for more episodes that challenge, inspire, and lead the change.
So, but that was the driving, and again, it's American competitive business.
Drove it.
That drove the creation of the Super Bowl.
Let me ask you this, though, and educate me, because I was always under the thought process. They still were separate leagues until the Jets and Kansas City won the Super Bowl, and then they officially merged. Is that
right.
is that wrong?
Yes, they said, we'll have a world championship game between these two leagues for 3 years.
Got it. And then they merged.
Right. Yeah, so that was all part of the agreement.
Got it.
For 1970 season, we will officially completely merge.
Let me ask you this, though, because most people think that because Green Bay won the first two Super Bowls, and they annihilated the Raiders and the Chiefs, right?
Right.
And then the thought, at least what I've read before, is that, when the Jets won, right? That was like the whole AFL players was rooting for the Jets because it was still that rivalry. And then Kansas City won, right?
Right.
They beat the Vikings.
Yep.
They beat the Vikings, right? And Jets beat Baltimore. But the thought process, had they not won those Super Bowls, that the merger probably wouldn't have happened. But you're saying that it probably
in the book, there's a really good story about after the Packers had won those two,
right?
And the Colts come into Super Bowl III.
They
were an 18-point favorite.
Exactly.
They were a huge favorite over the lowly Jets. So, and Joe Namath famously told the Miami
a guarantee.
Club.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it was a. You have to read it in the book. There was a heckler in the audience who spurred Joe Namath to make that comment. And he didn't have a script. He didn't plan to do that. Anyway, so yes, Joe Namath, they won that Super Bowl. And 2 days earlier, on the Friday before the Super Bowl, Commissioner Pete Rozelle had said, when the owners meet in the spring, we're going to look at restructuring the Super Bowl so that two NFL teams could meet in it and it would no longer be a matchup between these two leagues. Well, once the AFL showed we can beat your best.
Correct.
And we can, because they held the Colts scoreless until the fourth quarter.
Correct.
They really embarrassed them.
Right.
So, okay, now we're on an even playing field. And yes, the Chiefs won the next year. So now it's 2 wins for the NFL, 2 wins for the AFL, and okay, we're on an even keel here.
Let me ask you this, my brother. So that was fascinating, and you're 100% right. It was all shows about American business, especially meeting in the backseat of a Buick to hammer out a deal, or at least a framework of what it looks like, right? Now, it took 21 years, I think, before there was a black quarterback that won the Super Bowl. Talk about that and the significance that you write in your book about.
That was a real milestone because there was this myth in professional football that black athletes were great athletes. They were never going to be great leaders.
Right.
They couldn't be a leader of men.
Right.
They could follow what somebody told them to do. Here, you block on this line. Here's the ball. You run with it.
And to be fair to that point, that wasn't just a football myth. That was a myth that was put together for centuries.
Yes.
Right?
Right. And in a lot of sports and in a lot of areas.
And business and everything, right? Military, the whole 9 yards, right?
Yes. Imagine what Frederick Douglass could have been in American life. He's a brilliant man, well-read, traveled to Europe, but he could never run for office, right?
No.
So that was keeping this entire race down.
Correct.
The myths.
Correct.
So the myth that the Super Bowl was played for 21 years, so you had 42 starting quarterbacks. They were all white.
Mm-hmm.
Now you get to Super Bowl 22, XXII, and Doug, I've gotten to learn.
Buddy, I love it.
I've gotten to learn these Roman numerals really well. Doug Williams had replaced the starting quarterback for Washington just with 2 or 3 games left in the season.
Right.
And he was the starting quarterback as the
playoff starter.
Right. Washington makes it to the Super Bowl in San Diego.
Right.
And they're playing Denver of the AFL. And Denver opens up to a 10-0 lead in the first quarter. And Doug Williams he twists his ankle on a play. And he recounted the story later. He said they had the medical guys come out to see me. And he's lying there on his side. And he says, don't touch me. Don't touch me. If God wants me to complete this game, he's going to give me the strength to do it. So he missed one play. Jay Schrader came back in, played one play, and then Doug Williams comes in and throws 4 touchdown passes in that game. And Washington wins 42-10. And Doug Williams is declared the MVP. And finally, there's this obvious evidence that the myth has been bogus.
Right.
That here's a great player. He had been an All-American quarterback at Grambling.
Mm-hmm.
He had played. That has been his position in his life, and he proves it. And he was not someone who was going to wave a flag or I'm
No,
gonna
he
step
was
out in
very
front.
humble
Yes,
and stuff, right?
You know, hey, I'm part of a team.
Right.
And this is the job that I do on this team. So it was a great demonstration to the American public. And by Super Bowl 22, there were tens of millions of people watching this game, 75, 80 million people per minute. Whenever they give you the ratings, it's always per minute because the advertisers use it. If I put an ad in the Super Bowl,
Got it.
how many? So, because when they say, okay, this year's Super Bowl, 127.7 million people watch the Super Bowl. Wait a minute. That's only about a third of the American population. What were the other folks doing?
Right.
It's per minute because not everybody was watching the 3.5, 4 hours of the game solid. So anyway, millions and millions of people saw this and, well, hey, wait a minute. Boy, that was masterfully done. You know, and back then, quarterbacks were calling a lot of their own plays.
Right.
You know,
Correct.
you didn't have the offensive coordinator.
No.
There was no radio
No.
in your headset.
No.
You know, so it was a real demonstration on a very public stage that what people had been thinking was wrong.
Let's take that to the next level, right? Because years later, you had two black head coaches that went up and won against one another in the Super Bowl. So you talked about that myth, they can't lead, they can't do this, they can't do that. Now you got two black head coaches, right? And the thing about being a head coach in the NFL, you're the CEO
Right.
of the team, and these are billion-dollar organizations, right? Talk about the significance of that when you had Lovie Smith and
Tony Dungy.
and Tony Dungy.
Right. In Super Bowl in 2007. I think it was Super Bowl 41. XLI. Okay. All right. Okay. So I make the point in my book, and I think you got to read the book.
Yeah, buddy, I love it.
Some really good stories in here.
Right.
That here was an opportunity, and there had been black head coaches now.
Yes.
You know, Art Shell with the Raiders.
Art
that
Shell,
started-
you had Denny Green.
yeah, right. So
Right.
but they had never met on this huge stage. And the Super Bowl always gets twice as many viewers as any of the championship games. So if you're a football fan, you and I are football fans, we're going to watch the championship games. Well, twice as many people watch the Super Bowl. So you know you've got more than football fans.
Right.
You got a lot of the American populace who's
Right.
watching.
It's a cultural
Yes,
thing.
exactly. It's the winter's 4th of July. You
Correct.
got to join
Correct.
the party, right?
Correct.
So there was this opportunity to see, well, of course, these guys can lead, but now the top two coaches are both men of color. And they're not only responsible for what their players do, but what their players do affects those billion-dollar
There's no
organizations.
question. There's no
right?
question.
So they have a huge responsibility.
No question.
So not only is there leadership involved, there's responsibility involved. And okay, these two men led their teams, and you know, Tony Dungy's Colts won, and it was a real, I think it was a subtle reminder for people. What did I just see? 6 days later, Barack Obama announces he's going to run for president. Now he didn't wait for the Super Bowl.
Right.
He wound up with, I think, a little bit of a lift in that, you know what, maybe my old ideas that presidents have to be old white guys are wrong. My ideas are wrong.
Right.
So, and that really was and now you don't even look at the color of the coaches, you know, it makes a difference. So I think that sport in many ways has been a precursor of how America looks at life.
Right.
And how life changes, how our culture changes because of what sport has done. 1946, the NFL, 1947, Jackie Robinson, all this coverage, and suddenly, oh my goodness. And 1949, he was the MVP of the league.
Right.
So wait a minute. Wow. A guy that we had kept out. You know, and Jackie Robinson was started when he was 28 or 29 years old.
Right.
You know,
right.
he had been kept out of the major leagues.
Here's another nugget on that, right? After he came into the league, after he won the MVP, the next 16 of 20 MVPs in the National League were people of color. Think about that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it wasn't just him. It's just now he opened up an opportunity, and then they started bringing in other blacks and Hispanics and whole 9 yards, and then they became MVPs too.
Right. Yeah.
So that just goes to show it wasn't that they couldn't play; they just didn't get the opportunity.
Right. The door had not been opened.
And once the door opened, then they were able to showcase their talent, and people were seeing it. Let me take it to the next level real quick. We saw a black quarterback win the Super Bowl. We saw two black head coaches going up against one another in the Super Bowl. When do you think were we ready for a black commissioner? Because I think in college, do we have a black commissioner in college football?
Yes, in the Big Ten.
In the Big Ten, right? He wasn't, but he was commissioner of the conference, correct? Right. So, talk a little bit about that. I know we got Troy Vincent. There's a few other people, but talk a little bit about that.
In American sport, the commissioners of each of the leagues have always been white men. And a lot of it has to do with the educational opportunities that were opened for these white men in their early years, et cetera. And I'm not taking anything away from the qualifications of anybody who's commissioner. But you have a league, the NFL has been more than 50% black players for decades. And here you have Roger Goodell is 66. His contract goes for 2 more years. So he'll be 68 years old when, they decide whether or not, hey, Roger, you don't want to do this anymore. And Troy Vincent will only be 56. And Troy Vincent is such a qualified person in his background. He was the number 1 pick by the Dolphins as a defensive back in 1992. Played 15 years in the NFL, Dolphins and Eagles. He was the Walter Payton Man of the Year in impact on your community. When he was with the Eagles, he was trusted as the president of the Players Union for 4 years. Now, there is no other person who's even in the running who's got that kind of background with the connection with the players and, what are the players' interests? How am I representing them, et cetera? And now he's been with the league office for many, many years. He's executive vice president.
So is he his number 2? Is he Goodell's number 2?
There are a couple number 2s.
Got it.
I got this guy for special events and the international. Okay. And I've got this guy for advertising and sponsorship. But he's this very, very small inner circle.
Right.
And I think it would represent a lot to the world that here's a person, a leader, an established leader. And I very much would like to see, I'm not going to start printing up campaign posters, but Troy Vincent would make another one of these steps forward.
Right.
And that this is something that has been an exclusive white club.
Right.
And it doesn't need to be when you have leaders like Troy Vincent.
Right. And to be fair too, there are other people that could fill that job. A person of people or black or other individuals of color. A lot of times it has to do with the network, right? Or because the owners are the ones that's voting for the commissioners. So it's really about them feeling comfortable with somebody being the face of their league, because there's a lot of people that is qualified, all right, to do it. I remember a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, they were saying Condoleezza Rice before Goodell got. And obviously these are PR things, people throwing names out. Yep. But there's a ton of people who are black that could do that job. But it really comes down to the owners not seeing color and just seeing, to your point, seeing that this person is qualified and them being comfortable with that. Now,
he's an insider too. So the owners are comfortable with what he does,
exactly.
How he works.
You said the word. He's an insider, right? Yes. And that's the key. So if there's not any other people of color or black people that's insiders, it's going to be tough for them to get it, right? So that's why I love your point about Troy Vincent, because I can definitely see at least he could have an opportunity, right?
Right.
One of the things, I've been in sales for a long period of time. And, we have the ABCs in sales. It's called always be closing, right? But you've created your own ABCs, all right? Tell everybody what's your ABCs and why do you incorporate them?
Just before I do that, I want
Yeah.
to mention that in this book, the last chapter is my projection as to what Super Bowl 100 will look like
Buddy.
in the year 2066. And part of that is Roy Vincent, or a man of color, being a commissioner.
Wow. Oh, that's
and,
awesome.
And games being played, teams being located in Europe and around the world, et cetera.
So we got to make sure that, and we're going to put it up at the end of this. You got to make sure you pick up Dennis's book, because we only skim the surface on some of the nuggets that's in it, right? So it's important. And I'll be honest with you, I may buy a couple of copies just to give to some friends because it's so interesting, and I've learned a lot in this segment with you, right? But give us the AB. What's your ABCs, my brother?
And you know what? I have to give credit to Bill Rasmussen, who was the founder of ESPN. And I wrote about Bill Rasmussen in my previous book, which is called Live Sports Media. Anyway, it came out a couple of years ago, and mostly as a textbook for my classes. And when I talked to Bill, we had a 40th reunion, ESPN 40th reunion in 1919, just before the pandemic. And I said to Bill, I talk about you in my class and what you did and how, and here's the guy, you're talking about me in a class anyway. So I asked him about what it was that took him from being out of work. He was fired by the Whalers. He's 46 years old. And a month
Hartford
after
Whalers, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. A month after he's fired, he's announcing he's going to launch a television network. I know, okay, where do you get that? And he said, Dennis, without ABC and NBC, there never would have been an ESPN. And he said, ABC is always be curious. Ask questions.
Yeah, I love
Always
it.
be curious. Now, he didn't know anything about satellite, but he heard about it in a meeting with some cable operators in Connecticut. And so he starts asking questions, winds up with a meeting with a guy from RCA Satcom, and winds up, okay, I could buy one of these or lease one of these channels on a satellite for just $35,000 a month. Wow. That's only $1,000 a day?
Yeah.
What could I do, and what could I put on as content to do this? So always be curious. And NBC is never be complacent.
I love it.
Never be complacent. Now, if you think about what we were talking about, these NFL owners through the 1920s and 30s, they were all happy with what the kind of money they were making, where they were. It was an all-white league. Hey, we're complacent. It was not forward-looking, so never be complacent. And if things are going great in your status quo, look out, because the status quo is going to change.
There's no question.
Yes, right.
And most of the time, the status quo goes backwards, right?
Right.
And what do I mean by that? A lot of times I had to learn this too, is that, I just want to do this job and, make this type of money and I'm good. Well, nothing, either you moving forward or you moving backward.
Right.
All right?
Right.
Nothing stays the same, right?
Right.
So to your point about, I love what you said and give kudos to Bill. But the bottom line is you should always be curious.
Right.
And you should always be trying to move forward and continue to learn, right? And not look to stay stagnant.
Right.
So based on that, let me ask you this, my brother. I'm going to give you a little rapid, a closing quote prompt, right? So I want you to finish this sentence for our audience. If you want to change the world through storytelling, you have to
be curious. You have to not ask what's happening, but how is this happening? What's behind it? And why is it? So if you do that research, if you find what's going on, and okay, like Halley Harding, he finds out that the LA Coliseum is publicly owned.
Right.
Well, all right, why isn't the public represented?
Right.
So you not just what's happening. Okay, that is what they do. No, why do they do it? So all those things, and I think that you will change the world if you have the interest. Why are things happening? And then you have the courage to step up and voice that. Well, why is this? Why couldn't it change? Why couldn't it be better? How could we make it better? So those are I think it all goes to asking questions and stepping in as, well, okay, I'm not the expert. Let me learn about this. And the more you learn about it, then you've got an opportunity to, well, that doesn't sound right. It ought to be changed.
I love it, my man. I love it. You're just a guy full of knowledge and energy. It's fantastic. How can a Black Executive Perspective podcast help you, my brother?
Well, you know what? I have this great book that we've been talking about, Football Game That Changed America, How the NFL Created a National Holiday. And if your listeners and viewers are interested, it's available on Amazon, but here's a way to get it cheaper. If you go to, it's published by Rowman and Littlefield, and Rowman is ROWMAN. Got a W in there, like a Rowman. Okay?
Yeah.
So if you go to rowman.com and just enter my name, Deninger, is DENINGER. Everybody wants to give me more N's than I do. So I got enough. Dennis I got plenty of N's. Tony, I got lots of N's. I don't need more N's.
You don't need a bunch of them, huh?
I don't need any more N's. So go to Rowman, ROWMAN.com, and that's the website for the publisher. And just put my name in there. It's like another $5 off, or $10 off, actually, I think.
That's awesome. Real quick, are you looking to write any other books? No.
You know what? A lot of people ask me that question. And I've written 2 textbooks plus this book. So I've written 3 books since 2011.
Okay.
And the last one, the publisher came to me and said, hey, you wrote this book back in 2010. Could you update it now that the sports media has changed so much? So I actually put this project on hold while the publisher in London said, hey, we'd like you to do this book. So I have been writing solid for like the last 4 years. And when you're asking questions, not just putting down facts, okay, then one fact always leads to 2 or 3 more questions.
There's no question.
So I've been plugging away 25, 30 hours a week on these books. And now I'm kind of just enjoying a little bit of a respite. But I'm curious. I remain curious. So you may pitch an idea. Anyway, a lot of people want to pitch ideas. And we'll see, now that I have a little bit more time, I'm not teaching full time. Maybe another book will come up. But the concept for it I haven't created yet.
Well, more importantly, look, you're always going to be curious. So one day you'll probably end up writing something else. But more importantly to everybody else, definitely check out and pick up his book, The Game That Changed America. You're going to learn so much about it. It's just so fantastic about the biggest game on one day here in America, $40 billion day. So I want to thank my brother, Dennis Deninger, for coming on a Black Executive Perspective podcast. One more time, where can they pick up that book?
It's on Amazon.com, easy. But you can get it for a little off if you go to the publisher's website, which is ROWMAN.com. That's the publisher. And just put my name in there, DENIN.
And you get $5 off.
I think, yeah, I think it retails for about $35, and you can get it for about $25, I think.
Okay, awesome.
That's the way to do it.
Dennis, my brother, thank you for coming on a Black
great
Executive.
Pleasure, Tony. It was just fun.
Really enjoyed it. So now I think it's time for
Tony's Tidbit.
So the tidbit today, the true power of the Super Bowl isn't in the final score. It is in the stories it tells, the barriers it breaks, and how one game can move a nation. You heard a lot of that today from our friend Dennis here, and make sure you pick up his book, The Game That Changed America. So I also want you to remind you to make sure you check out Need to Know by Dr. Nasinga Burton. Dr. Burton provides crucial topics on the things that you don't have time to check out. You want to check her out every Thursday here on a Black Executive Perspective podcast. That's Need to Know by Dr. Nasinga Burton. And don't forget our next roundtable or pull up, speak up, where we talk about real hot button issues and topics, unfiltered, raw. You don't want to miss it. It's not just an episode, it's a revolution. Check out Pull Up, Speak Up on a Black Executive Perspective podcast. For now is our time for our call to action. For those who've watched and listened to a Black Executive, you know our goal. But if this is your first time listening and watching a Black Executive Perspective podcast, our goal, our mission is to eliminate and decrease all forms of discrimination. And how we do that and how we want you to do that is to incorporate our acronym called LESS, L-E-S-S. L stands for learn. You want to learn about other racial and cultural nuances so you can learn more about people that you're not familiar with. Then after you learn, you have the letter E, which stands for empathy. Now, since you learned about people and things that they go through that you wasn't privy to, now you can put yourself in their shoes. And then after empathy, the first letter is S. Now you want to share what you've learned to your friends and colleagues so they can become enlightened as well. And then the final S is stop. You want to stop, we want to stop discrimination as it walks in your path. So if Aunt Jenny or Uncle Joe says something inappropriate at the Sunday dinner table, you say, Aunt Jenny, Uncle Joe, we don't believe that. We don't say that. And you stop it right there. So if everyone can incorporate less, LESS, will build a more fair, more understanding world, and we all will see the change that we want to see because less will become more. Don't forget to check out the next episode of a Black Executive Perspective podcast on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can follow us on our socials of X, YouTube, LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram at a Black Exec. For our fabulous guests, my man, the author behind the book, The Game That Changed America, Dennis Deninger. I'm Tony Tidbit. We talked about it. We learned about it. We laughed about it. We're going to continue to strive about it, and we're going to thrive about it. We love you, and now we're out.
A Black Executive Perspective.